All right, got it. Three, two, one, go.
Sitaram, welcome all. It's a privilege to be with you all once again.
All
And
right, got
here
it.
is a, now here is a short introduction to our session. They turned us into warriors.
You're about to cancel, right?
Right there, man.
Sorry?
Shh, damn it. Yeah.
Sitaram, welcome all. It is a privilege to be with you once again. Here is a short introduction to today's session. They turned us into warriors by degrading and ridiculing us. They turned us into warriors, forcing us into guarding and protecting our history. They turned us into warriors, rousing greater pride in ancestry. Warriors loyal to Trinidad, land of our birth, to which we stand whole, in tribute to 140,939 men and women of India who came unknowingly that there was no return. Warriors as seekers of truth, writing our history with indelible ink, year after year, in the habit of the oral traditions we meet, not just to think or write, but to pour the contents of our soul, to leave the world richer by our experiences, generation after generation. May, designated Indian Heritage Month each year, highlights the things that make us whole as a people. 178 years ago, when Indians began arriving on these shores, seeking a better life was far from their minds. They were fooled into believing that they were going on the other side of the river to work for a few days and return with much needed finances for their families. It was a time of severe hardship under colonialism in India. 3 to 5 months on a ship turned the waters black. They called it Kalapani for the sufferings endured during the journey. It was teachings of the oral traditions that enabled them to survive plantation life and give birth to Indo-Trinidadianism. These are just some of the facts. Today, as we begin to look back, I want to pay tribute to one of our greatest warriors and protectors of Indian ancestry, Ramdat Jagisa. He was supposed to speak to us today. The shocking news of his passing has left us in deep mourning. A whole generation of friends. So we will pay tribute to him in subsequent programs. He was behind the call for an Indian Arrival Day celebration way back in the 1960s. The first item on the agenda today, we have quite a lot of readers, and all of these programs actually are the creative content from our members. The first section is an interview part in which Polo Dani Maraj, who has surprised us this year with her inimitable journalistic style, she has done a series of investigative reports titled Arrival and Survival, and which he also posted on social media. Vishnu Gosain, our prominent poetry and prose member, will do a short interview on her contribution to this year's celebration. Thank you. Over to Vishnu and Pulu Dani Maraj.
Okay. So to speak to Ms. Dani for a few minutes, I guess 15 minutes or somewhere there, on a series of short articles she has been doing for Facebook. The first thing I want to settle down is that, Ms. Dani, could you tell us, your listening audience, where are some of the places that Indians settled in Trinidad? Hello? No?
Hi. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are hearing you.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Loud and clear, Pulu, loud and clear.
Yes, we're hearing you. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. Thank you for having me here. Okay, Vishnu. So the first question is some of the places the Indians settled, but I would like to go really to what caused me to be here today. It's my month of dedication to tribute to our ancestors. That I decided to do 1 month of short writings on arrival and survival. I called it Reflections on Arrival and Survival, because oftentimes we hear of arrival and the problems that our ancestors met and what they went through, but we haven't heard about how they survived, the things that they did to survive. So that is what it is. Some of the places I gather that they've settled are St. James, Karani, Calcutta settlement, Madras settlement, Patna village, Delhi Road or Delhi settlement, Faizabad, Gandhi village, Debe, Chandanagar in central, Pinal, Barakpur, Debe, Kuva and environs, Pointe-a-Pierre, Bonaventure. The list go on and on and on. You have Barakpur, Coromandel village in Cedrus, Taheri village in Toko, and many, many more places. So the list goes on.
All right, thank you. Okay, could you say in some short sense, some short words, what might be the issue that affected them when they settled there? Or could I rephrase that? What are some of the experiences of hardships or goodwill during indentureship then?
Well, some of the things that we know all the time is that they had problems with improper sanitation was one of the main problems, and they had a problem with proper drinking water. In fact, I was reading an article recently where it said that they drank water from the canals and the ponds and the rivers, and that got them very sick, all kinds of diseases. Another main problem, and there were many, but another main problem that I remember is that they were beaten, whipped for every little thing. And one of the things is if they broke their contract, they were beaten and jailed and sometimes beaten to death. If they ran away, they were all and caught, they were beaten, or their indentureship was doubled. Those are some of the things that I recall offhand.
Why do you think they were sent to these particular places like Debe and Pinal and Kuva, St. James, Barakpur, Faizabad?
I think what happened, the planters are the ones who applied, if that's a correct term, for them. So it was where the planters were, where they had the estates, that they got them and they were sent there in those areas. At least that's what I read.
Okay. Are those same lands called lagoon lands now? You know, there's a term lagoon land. You live in a lagoon land.
What I gathered in one of my writings, I said it that after the end of slavery, when lands were, in fact, the planters had the best lands, and when the Africans got lands, what little they got some of the better ones that remained after the planters. So the worst parts were the lagoons that nobody wanted to go there. And that was the lands that the Indians took. They had no choice. They took those lands and made it work for them.
No. In a sense, we are saying that there might have been cane land, but is it true that the Indians also work in the cocoa and coffee estates?
Yes,
How did
as
it
far
happen
as
to
I
do
know. Well, well, I guess people are there. There are like even in Cedrus, the most recent post I had, I think was yesterday, with the volcano. That shipload of people went to Cedrus. They landed in Cedrus and they were sent to the coconut estate there. I don't recall the name right now. They went to I think it's the St. Mary estate or Green Hill, some place called Green Hill. That's what they said. So that's the coconut estate they went to. And there were others went to the cocoa estates and stuff. Remember, it lasted from 1845 to 1917. So it was a long period of time. And then when sugar was going out as king, they indented into different areas, like the cocoa and the coconut estates and stuff.
So there was sugar, they were sent to sugar estates, and they also work in coffee estates, and they work in the coconut estate.
Yeah.
So, were they like, I know we have a short time, right? But I'm trying to figure out if they were only to see us in the coconut estates, or were they in Manzanilla also? That area there where there are a lot of coconuts.
Manzanilla had coconuts, so most probably.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Mayaro, Manzanilla.
I am Manzanilla. I know you talk research or gather your material, but I'm just wondering if you like found something extremely disturbing in the way in how the Indians lived on the estate, something that really touched you and said to you, what the hell, this is how they lived? What caused all this? Something totally disturbing you as a researcher or as an Indian, that your ancestors lived under the world hardships. What do you think those things might be?
I would think all of it. Not just our ancestors, but even the Africans as well. They all lived within the whole system that they lived under was inhumane. So I wouldn't even go point in one aspect. It was every aspect. They were treated less than human.
All right. So, tell me something about the houses in which you live. Were they actually, tell me something about the houses in which the Indians lived. Were they like nice and accommodating, or were they like cramped conditions, or were they like unhygienic?
Very unhygienic. They were also in cramped conditions from my readings and from interviews and stuff. They had the barracks that they lived in was very small. If I remember, it was 8 by less than 10. I don't recall the exact numbers, size, but it was very small. And the walls were, they had no privacy. The walls, you could have climbed over and look at the other side. So they had absolutely no privacy. Families lived in the room, so you didn't have just male and female. After a while, you had families living in one room. Yeah.
Okay. We are talking about illnesses and things like that. Were there anything like I don't use the word doctor, but I really mean that. Were there like a doctor in attendance? Were there like pharmacy in attendance? I know when I grew up in Esperanza, there was a place called the doctor shop, where people were ill, they went there. Anything like that?
I think we must try to understand what timing we're looking at, because if we're talking about early indentureship as opposed to your time, it would be a vast difference. But from reading, I understand that there was a lack of medical support for these people. That's why a lot of them died from their sicknesses when they got things like typhoid, I think it was one of them, measles, all these other illnesses, that they were not getting medical attention as quickly as expected.
I know they walk the plantations, cane fields and all that without shoes. Is there a word like jigger that came into research? A word like jigger?
Oh yeah. Yes. I'm sure you read that part. It was, and jigger lasted way into my grandmother's time, and she was born in 1917, and she died in 92. But she said when she was small, she had jigger, and because they walked bare feet. They had no shoes and slipper and stuff. They walked bare feet, and this was like a bacteria that got into their skin. My mother-in-law explained it as if fly or sandfly were on your feet. The sandfly bite you, and it would stick on your skin and then eat into your skin. That's how she had it as well. And the jigger will lay eggs and turn into the size of a pea pod. Then it had to be dug out, and they would put things like ash, warm ash, or maybe oil and other medicine to cure the area. So it was one of the main problems they had.
I know we are running against time and all that. But tell me something quickly. I want to jump a little bit. That what push you to write? I know you said it's a month of devotion and month of that, but what actually pushed you to write the series of short articles on indentureship or survival? And
actually, I have been collecting stories from over decades in the media, in my own lifestyle, in my own family. I have been interviewing my elders, and I am preparing short stories to tell these stories. I'm preparing short stories then to write on the lives that my family lived. I thought I should share it, a little bit of it, with the nation. And I hope that the youths and even the adults, it will click some kind of imagination, and people would think really, we keep hearing arrival, but actually, how did they survive? What was in their minds? What was going through in their minds when they were living and.
Yeah, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask you this. How were the women affected? How were the women affected?
What do you mean? How they were affected? In what way? I'm not getting you.
By the conditions of the plantation, were they actually, they themselves suffered because of it? I mean, they suffered like everybody else.
Oh yeah.
But were there any particular areas in which the women suffered? Or were disturbed or embarrassed? Anything at all about how the conditions or?
The women suffered even worse than the men, I think, because when I think of reading and hearing about how they were actually physically and sexually abused in the cane fields and wherever and whenever the Englishmen wanted, the Englishmen quotes. I will give you a little thing. I'm thinking that, long ago, you would see somebody with blue eyes, right? And you wonder that this person has dark skin, all the family has dark skin, and this person came out with blue eyes. What happened? I have interviewed somebody like that, and the history is that the person's grandmother was raped. And the women, the indentured women, went through terrible, terrible physical, mental, and sexual abuse. And there was nobody to help them. It's a very touchy topic.
Okay, I think we are basically run out of time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for being with. Maybe one day we'll talk again about the same topic of indentureship. Okay, thank you very much. Over to you.
RT on mute.
Okay. Sorry about the little delay there. I know these interviews. Calls for far more discussion on the whole issue, and there's so much of food for thought from the answers that Pulu has given us. But we move on to our next speaker. Krishna is a retired secondary school teacher, and he's an author and a poet. He will read a poem that he has written about the temple in the sea, and perhaps Krishna will tell us a little more into the making of that poem itself. Over to you, Krishna.
Yeah, okay. Well, it was just that line that was coming to me, who builds a temple in the sea? And the rest of the poem followed it once I sat down and it wrote itself. But then I had to do a little research on the man himself, the sadhu, because I wanted to make sure what I'm saying is correct. And he found out a number of things about him, and the temple became to me, after I wrote the poem, a symbol of the sadhu's the fight of his human spirit. The temple as a monument to the sadhu's human spirit. When I found out that he had an idea that he built the temple and so on. But when he got into the details about how he actually went about it, when he built the first temple, and he was told to break it down because they said it was on the private land, the land of the estate of Tate and Lyle, the sugarcane company. And they find him. When I researched it, you get some variance in the details. So I can't stick my neck out for it. 100 pounds or $500 equivalent to 2 years wages. And then he was jailed for 14 days. And the temple was bulldozed to the ground by the colonial authorities. When he came back out, he was so insistent that we need a temple and this place where he was staying. I understand is Brickfield. They call it Barrancore, right? Brickfield. He was so adamant that he had to build this temple. So he looked out, and that's when he started to build the temple. And well, first of all, he had to build the pedestrian walkway to it. And people seeing him, he did it by himself. He did it. I understand he was using a truck. And then one day, the flood, the tide came up on him and the truck damaged. Then he had to resort to a bicycle. And people watching him used some. He did it alone, he did it unaided, and then on top of that, he was ridiculed. But he continued building the walkway and then building the temple. What I understand too is that he went back to India ever so often. You know, it's not that he stayed here. He used to go to India to have these devotions to temples across there. So what he was doing is trying to build a temple that would be reminiscent of the kind of worship that people were doing in India, close to the river Ganges. So the temple, you know, might look at it and say, okay, it's a temple in the sea, but there's a lot of symbol to it, I'm saying. And it is a shrine. Temple is a shrine. It is a sanctuary for devotees of the Hindu faith. It's a place of pilgrimage for Hindus and non-Hindus, visitors. The sea rings with music and prayers, especially during the festival of Kartik. The sadhu wanted, as I said, a sacred place near the water to worship. It sits significantly adjacent to the cremation site, where, in the words, I want to repeat the words of Zarina Shah, who, when she saw the poem on Facebook, she responded, the cremation site where ashes of generations of ancestors, a lovely way she put it there, very poetic, ashes of generations of ancestors swirl past that temple. So there's a lot of symbolic significance to the temple. And the term Waterloo is significant also because Waterloo, the Waterloo refers, there's a historical allusion to Waterloo because that is where Napoleon was defeated. So if you go a little into that too, you could see where it has resonance to the Sadhu, where he was not defeated, he defeated the authorities. But in a sense too, when he died and the temple became neglected, he too, like he faced his Waterloo. But the government rescued his efforts, and to this day we have the temple at Waterloo. And that's what I'm going to read. Temple at Waterloo. Who builds a temple in the sea? India. To me, that says it all. Who builds a temple in the sea? India eyed her own, the Kala Pani crossing to plantations, their lives to indenture. The plan called for, it seemed, a tossing of the past with a mooring of one's roots to new lands. To cope with the inhumane terms, an axe beat it out and yield the fruits born from the land of gods, not bitter cane, a sadhu to his gods, a Siwala raised on land not his. The kutia crushed, still he set his sights on no man's land. Now praised for faith, it must have led to his heart's fill, a mandir with a causeway to conceive. A landmark in the sea, would you believe? Thank you. Thank you, RT. Thank you, Poetry and Prose.
Thanks, Krishna. Again, that is that is one thing that we could talk about whole day, the contribution and that temple in the sea. So, but we will move on to Heather Laltu Ferguson, retired journalist and 6 times author with roots in Pinal, Trinidad. She will read Bitter Cane, and she will be followed by author Frank Mohan, a Princestown-born Canadian with a medical career behind him. Frank will read an excerpt from The Peripatetic Skylark. Thank you. Over to Heather.
Hi, everybody. I'm coming all the way from Canada with a story about my great-grandmother, Bagmania, from Rajasthan. And this speaks to what Vishnu asked Pulu about the women. My great-grandmother met up with a Scottish overseer and had 2 children by him. But I'll get into that. I wrote a whole story about her. It's called Bitter Cane, the tragic love story of Bagmania and Mackie. His name was Macquarie, we called him Mackie. From 1845 to 1917, tens of thousands of East Indians from India sailed across the Kalapani to take up work on cocoa, rice, and sugar plantations throughout Trinidad. Each of those individuals have their own unique story. Here is the story of my great-grandmother Bagmania, who made the voyage in 1887 at age 11, accompanied by a friend from her village. She was the mother of my paternal grandmother, Ethel Macquarie, who became the second wife of Reverend Henry Laltu, himself a traveler from Uttar Pradesh in India, who came at age 5 with his family to Trinidad in 1881. Bagmania's story of arrival comes down in the oral tradition of our family from such reliable sources as my cousin and historian, Dr. Rosabelle Tampat Ciceran, who was her granddaughter. Here is a snapshot of a brief love affair between a plantation overseer from Scotland and an indentured worker from India, my great-grandparents Hugh McCrory, known as Mackie, and the young girl, Bagmania. Mackie stood on the veranda of his plantation house and looked out over the immense expanse of the cane field stretching toward the horizon. A sea of cane stalks seemed to go on forever, the gentle tropical breeze billowing through it like waves on an ocean of green. Dark smoke smudged the skyline to the east, and the acrid smell of burning cane filled the air, but Mackie leaned back against the porch rails and smiled. He was lord and master of all he surveyed. In truth, Mackie was a long way from the land of his birth. Born Hugh McCrory to a huge working-class family of 7 siblings from Ayrshire, Scotland, Mackie faced a life of eking out a living off the hard scrabble heath or working at a dark, dank factory near Glasgow. Neither appealed to him as a young man of 20 years old with a sense of adventure and a drive to seek his own fortune. He had heard of the many great opportunities in the tropics where huge plantations fueled resources in massive amounts to keep the wheels of commerce grinding for the wealth and ease of the colonial masters. 7 weeks at sea on a ship headed for the West Indies had given Mackie ample time to think. Bound for the colony of Trinidad and Tobago in the British West Indies, he had applied for a job as an overseer on a sugar plantation. There he would have a measure of freedom, a house to himself, a retinue of servants ready to cater to his every whim. He would be an important personage on a plantation, not long lost among the hordes of underemployed and underprivileged youth in Scotland. By the time Mackie had disembarked at Port of Spain Harbor, he felt empowered and well equipped to face the adventure before him. He headed out east by horse and buggy to the Santa Rosa estate near the town of Arima. He had come to the plantation at the height of the harvest season when mature fields were torched and burned and left to cool before the beehive of activity of harvesting cane stalks began in earnest. This was a busy time for an overseer. He had to make sure all the workers reported for duty, all the carts were filled to capacity for transport to the sugar mills. During harvesting, Mackie had to make his appointed rounds, but the rest of the season offered much time for leisure and reflection. Now, as he reviewed all the events that led up to his present situation, he felt relaxed and happy. Lost in his thoughts, he slowly became aware of sounds of a distant altercation. The sounds grew closer and closer. There were male voices raised in anger and a sound of a female crying. Mackie looked up and suddenly he saw a group of men crashing through the metal gate of his home, dragging a young girl by her arms. Massa, she don't want to work. She won't do what we tell she. She just look at the pitchfork and start to cry. But she come on the boat to work. Why she don't want to work? Mackie looked at the girl. She seemed timid and frightened. Tears flowed down her pretty face. Her deep-set eyes were sad and pained. Mackie felt pity for her plight. Not the strictest of taskmasters, he said. Never mind, she can work in the house. And he waved her towards the house. I need a housemaid since Julian and his wife moved to the Tabaki plantation, referring to the last yardman whose wife cooked and cleaned the house for him. What is your name, girl? He asked. Bagmania, she replied. Can you cook, girl? She nodded. Good, if you can begin right away. I will consult with your family. Who are they? Mackie asked. I have no family, the girl said between tears. I come on the boat alone. Mackie looked at the girl and marveled. What family would allow such a waif to travel such an enormous distance from India to Trinidad alone, he wondered. Really, there's no accounting for these people, he whispered under his breath, slightly annoyed that this little fracas had interrupted his thoughts. Lalman, he called to his present yardman. Show the girl around, and he strode off to complete his daily rounds. Upon his return later, he asked the girl, he gestured to the adjacent wicker sofa on the veranda and said, "Sit down and tell me how you came to Trinidad on your own." Bagmania's demeanor changed. She stiffened and sighed. She began her tale. She was born into a family of some means in a small village on the outskirts of Jaipur in northern India. She had been instructed at a local English school for girls, and she was considered well educated for a girl and a good marriage prospect for her family's arrangement with a man from a local prominent family. Due to be married off soon to her parents' choice of a 65-year-old man with a harem and several wives, she was devastated. She confided her fear and disgust to a family friend who had herself been married off to an older man who repeatedly abused her. One day, while walking in the village, they both happened to chance upon a meeting of village elders and crowds of people with Englishmen wishing to recruit workers to go to the West Indies to work on plantations. The girls paused to listen, the single line jumping out of them: "You will make enough money in just a few years to return to India like Rajas." Both unhappy with their lot in life, they hatched a plot to run away to Trinidad, make lots of money, and return to ward it all over their oppressors. Making note of the time of departure, they secretly hoarded together all their jewelry and valuables, knotted them into jaji bundles, and waited to make their move. Under the cover of darkness, on an appointed night, they made for the lorry to Bombay, where they were to meet a ship bound for Trinidad. In this way, Bagmania had escaped the prison of marriage to a man she did not know, let alone love. Nothing could have prepared her for the harrowing voyage by sea. Neither she nor her friend even knew where Trinidad was, and having no idea of distance, they had misjudged the enormity of their undertaking. Confined to the bowels of the ship, Bagmania felt every heave of the hull as the ocean's waves battered its flanks. Packed together with the others like sardines, she was devastated to realize she had made the wrong decision. Filth, bad smells, rotting food, and pestilence plagued the inmates of the ship. Many succumbed to death and were simply tossed overboard to a watery grave far from home. Lost in anonymity, these poor souls slipped into a void, only witnessed by the silent, watchful eyes of their fellow passengers, frightened for their own sanity. Eventually, after many months at sea, Port of Spain harbor loomed in the distance. Bagmania felt physically ill. What fate awaited her? Scared and practically alone, she felt dizzy as she stepped onto dry land. As she disembarked, her friend offered to hold her bundle as she navigated the gangplank. When she turned to retrieve the bundle, she found her friend had vanished, taking her last worldly possessions with her. Truly now alone in the world, devoid of family and friends, or possessions for that matter, she was herded along with others for transport to a sugar plantation. Once there, she had been processed for work and shown to a field. It was here she balked at the physical nature of the work, not having had any experience as a field hand. And it was at this juncture that she had been brought to Mackie into the plantation house. Bagmania ended her story reduced to tears. Here ends the excerpt from a larger book entitled Bitter Cane, to do with the eventual love affair that developed between Bagmania and Mackie. It was a forbidden love that produced two children, my great uncle Francis and my grandmother Ethel, both born to Bagmania when she was still just a teenager and Mackie in his mid-20s. When the British authorities learned of the affair and Mackie's plans to marry Bagmania, they fired him from his position and barred him from obtaining any other position in Trinidad. He had to leave the island and return to Scotland. Eventually, he went to Alaska as part of the Klondike Gold Rush, visiting Trinidad every 2 years to see his children and provide funds to a local bank for their upkeep and education. He died in 1928 in Guyana prospecting for gold. He was 65. He drowned in a tributary of the Rarpuni River when he fell overboard from a small boat carrying passengers who witnessed his drowning. His body was never found. He had never married or formed another romantic attachment like the one he had with Bagmania. Bagmania died in 1940 and is buried in the Paradise Pasture Cemetery in San Fernando. Thank you.
And what a fascinating story. And thankfully, it is in a book so that we can revisit it again and again. Are you hearing
Yes,
me?
and maybe I can send it to Pulu to go with her stories.
Yeah, yes. It should be on the bookshelves in Trinidad, yeah, in the libraries and so on.
I guess these things really happened.
But there's so many, there's so many fascinating stories. Just when you think that you have learned everything, another, somebody else comes up with these wonderful stories of hardship in different ways. Yeah. And there's so much
Right.
more we need to talk, and very interesting storytelling as well. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Heather, it was so good to see you and to hear from you again. It's been a long time. We will move on to Haricharan Narayan. He is another retired teacher um, and an author with books to his name. He will read House of Sacred Songs and will be followed by Gersha Mahavir, who founded Poetry and Prose. She has a pen and a voice for poetry and other writings, and she will read selected poems. So we over now to Haricharan Narayan, and he will be followed by Gersha Mahavir. Thank you.
Are you hearing me?
Loud and
Yes.
clear.
Thank you. You know, I have been absent for a number of meetings, and I am not in good health. So I've made a special effort to come out today to rejoin Poetry and Prose. So let me greet you according to this season. Sitaram, Namaste, Assalamu Alaikum. I have been given a piece to read here, and as Arti said, is a house of sacred songs. It is very interesting, touching, and with deep religiosity. So here goes the house of sacred songs. Even before the children heard the holy man speak, they had become addicted to satsang, chanting the names of God in Sankirtan or sacred songs. Sri Satya Sai Baba preached the significance of the chanting of God's name. He said, in the dark ages, there is a silver lining just by chanting the names of the Universal Father. One can attain moksha or salvation. In satsang, participants are immersed in a devotional bath for a closeness with celestial beings. They speak to God in song. Sweet music is played, the harmonium, dantal, dolak, majira, flute or basuri, and sitar blend with hands clapping and voices harmonize in a divine offering. In the house of sacred songs, it became a tradition to host the finest bhajan singers, pundits, and musicians the world over. Swami Atmananda was a much sought after Hindu leader. Almost every night of the year, he was booked to perform yajna at various venues throughout the island. Young and dynamic, Swami was a graduate of Varanasi Hindu University, and his lectures were legendary. The House of Songs was missing the vibe that only Swami could provide. Due to the death of a family member, a scheduled 3-day satsang was suddenly cancelled. Swami was now free for those 3 nights. He sent a message to the House of Song. In such a short time, will you be able to arrange it? Swami's secretary asked. Raj, the eldest son replied with confidence. Tell Swami, we have been ready for a long time now. Rani Ma, the matriarch of the family, was ecstatic. Only in satsang with Swami would she be able to quench her parched spirit. The children immediately got to work. With practiced hands, they began preparing, sweeping the house, the yards, even the rooftops, and when completed, they moved to scrub the dirt and wash all the surfaces clean. Then the decorations began. The grand old house was completely transformed. An air of anticipation spread throughout the village community. In 3 days, all was ready for the arrival of the noble Swami. Crepe paper, cut into delicate patterns, hung on lines beneath the ceiling. A string of mango leaves marked a square 12 by 12 area reserved for Swami and the orchestra that would perform rituals at the start and finish of the session. Chairs were laid out, loudspeakers strategically placed, food was prepared to be served after the 2-hour reading and singing. The musicians tuned up their instruments and an audience took their seats. At 6 p.m. sharp on the dot, Swami arrived. He stepped out of the luxurious white vehicle and was given a ceremonial welcome by family members. With precision, the needs of the participants were met for devotion. The feast following with a sharing of parcels of prasad, the guests sat talking and laughing past midnight on each of the 3 nights. On the 4th day, there was silence. Mata Rani woke up early as usual and took her seat before the rising sun. She was deep in thought. 18 children she had given birth to. A widow now. Her husband, the children's father, had been honest, hardworking, and strict. He had maintained peace and respect while sending them all to school and providing for their every need. Tears fell from her eyes. Where did she go wrong to have found herself alone in a sprawling house with a house help for company was the ultimate betrayal, she thought. She listened to the children one by one as they came to visit her. She watched the faces of each one as they built a case against the other. Fingers were pointed. One labeled a drunkard, the other a thief, the third a prostitute, another a good-for-nothing, and the list went on. Hatred, jealousy, ignorance played havoc as she tried to reason with each one to bring peace and harmony. And just when she gave up hope of ever seeing her children united as they had been when their father was alive, a satsang would somehow materialize. As if in a dream come true, the beauty of the togetherness of her family, if momentarily, became the envy of others. She should have been contented. Instead, she blamed herself for being easily influenced and for not taking a stand. Was it a sin to love your children too much? She asked the powers from above. She couldn't bear to chastise them. And there at her feet, lying in fragments, was her precious dream of family, of wealth, joy, and prosperity. And she's so empty, praying that karma would be kind to them as she withdrew in readiness to leave the world. And that's the end. I come to the end. I don't know who the author is, but maybe Arity knows and she would say it. Thank you very much for listening.
Yeah, Harry, that's one of my stories in the new book. It's coming out.
I thought so.
Yeah. Thank you it's good to see you and thank you for reading. We know that you're not well and I hope that you recover very quickly, right?
Thank you so much, all of you.
Yes. Good to see you. Good to see you. Okay, we are following with the others with Gusha Mahavir. Is she ready? Gusha,
Hi.
yeah. Okay.
Yes, Harry, it's very nice to see you. I'm going to be reading a few pieces today, 2 from our lovely Artie, and I will start with the first. It's called Pledge. He vowed never to carry hatred or bitterness within him. He was determined not to tolerate lying, cheating, backbiting. He pledged to do his part in keeping the peace. He promised never to let anyone invade his space, steal his sleep, curtail his freedom. He refused to be subjugated to boundaries of race or religion. He could not be silenced for speaking out against violence. He was determined to fight for equality, respect, and freedom, and would not stand by and be a witness to bullying of any sort. He wanted to live his best life with humility and compassion, to honor the universe, living every moment of every day till he died in the gentle flow of the river of life. He vowed to live in a pure and simple style. So that was very beautiful. Second piece is called Ancestry. Coming from generations whose feet couldn't fit shoes, who, if they must wear flip-flops, whose hands so used to gilpin, brushing cutlass and grass knife, hands too coarse to hold fork and spoon in dining elegance, whose coffee was black and sweet with brown sugar, held in a tin enamel cups, whose world were the open fields where rivers hill run and hills climbed, and food, a gift of the land, whose hearts were pure and life hard but simple, with knowledge embedded from those who came before, a brotherhood understood, all for one and one for all, not preached but practiced, and the child raised by the village, whose love was unconditional, giving without taking, working day and night to leave the world a better place, whose pioneering ancestors could neither write nor read, sacrificing to send their children for an education, whose progeny today holds the legacy, my roots, my history. That's a lovely piece. I'm hearing a bit of background noise. I don't know if that's from me. And my last piece is from another poet. It's a poem written specifically for Indian Arrival Day, Ram Sumar Prasad, and it was taken from The Lotus Blooms, a collection of his poetry. So if you can, pick up a copy of that book, A Lotus Blooms. They came, they saw, they conquered. They came here since 1845. They toiled, they prayed. They worked in the sun and rain, from morning to night, in their hearts and minds. Lord Rama gave them solace. Lakshman gave them courage. Mother Sita gave them a sense of duty. Hanuman gave them protection. They saw this new land. Some had hopes to return home. Others decided to stay. They made this land their home. They worked hard on the lands where others have tried. They knew what was to be done. They made this place a richer country. From what they earned, they still saved a little. The desire was there to have a family. They conquered all obstacles. They worked and loved and prayed. They came to their own. They had arrived. Thank you for allowing me to read.
Okay, what a lovely voice. It sounded so good. Thank you very much. We must get you to do some more reading for us. You make the poetry sound even better than what it really is.
Your words
Um,
made it easy, Artie. It was lovely pieces,
Yes, and
especially the first
we
line.
would never know it was so beautiful unless we hear it from your voice. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So we will move on to Cynthia Birch, and Cynthia is a retired educator. She's an author, and she has produced several of our poetry and prose sessions as well. She will read today The Jewels My Mother Gave Me and a poem called Inspired, two short pieces. And Cynthia will be followed by Vishnu Gosai, who will be reading some more on, he tell us some more on Sivda Sadhu. Thank you very much, and over to Cynthia.
Thank you very much, Artie. I'm very happy that Artie has entrusted two pieces right so beautifully. The first one is The Jewels My Mother Gave Me. She said, "Don't laugh so much or something bad will happen." Words that would provide balance between laughter and tears, light and darkness, good and evil, joy and sorrow. She said, "It's not what you say, it's how you say it." The understanding dawned. Words must be chosen carefully and used to make those who care for you understand. She said, "You never miss the water till the well runs dry." The children learned to make do with the little they had, just in case they didn't get to be so lucky as to have that little also. She said, "Common sense make before good book sense." Using common sense is important. It sharpens the ability to distinguish between right and wrong, and not to just go along with popular beliefs. She said, "I asked Ma one day, why do women have to suffer so severely?" And Ma said, "In the Ramayana, when Sita, mother of the world, was banished, no one came to her assistance. Sita also walked through the fire time and again to teach us how to stay whole, regardless of the pain we must endure." And I asked Ma further, "What about men?" She said, "Like Sri Hanuman, who lifted the mountain with his bare hand, so too men are called upon to lift the burdens of their family and society as well." Ma said, "Don't worry about bad things people say about you. They could only talk as far as their sense could reach." We learned to turn a deaf ear to criticism. The School of India's enduring oral traditions opened its door to me during childhood. I drank from its fountain of knowledge. In my mother's shadow, I stood before the rising sun to offer jal. I learned methods of cooking and housekeeping. In the fields with my father, I learned organizational skills. Sugarcane and rice were planted in neat rows, and each plant was given a type of reverence for the food and funds provided to support the family. Spirituality became a protective layer of the universe with stories that drew a moral compass of values to live by. There were books at school and books at home with fascinating stories. I understood that what I knew was but a drop in the ocean. I felt reassured of stories to last a lifetime. I learned about growing up to be a woman who can walk through fire and again like Sita, and later in life knew what I had to do when I found myself a single parent. I also had to become Drupati, standing in public with the fear of being stripped naked, and knew how to calm myself to seek divine intervention. To know that domestic violence can never harm the me that dwells within the soul, separate from the body. I learned that this face can be made beautiful like the goddess Durga and has the power to turn demonic when driven to anger. On this foundation, I write. And also by Artie is a short piece, Inspired. I stand before you at the start of this day to renew myself in your grace. I lift my spirits high to receive your light, to wash the darkness of yesterday. My eyes blessed from seeing you. The heart is joyful and pure. I begin to write my daily healing exercise, spreading my light through words. The sound of the flute fills my ears. I feel your presence near. My heart begins to dance. Like warm sunshine, let my words turn into flowers, one for each human soul to experience the bliss of your closeness. I pray. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you very much for it. Was a lovely reading. And it's good to see you again after a long time as well.
Thank
We have
you and welcome.
yes. It's Frank. Are you Frank Mohan? I'm sorry that we you were supposed to follow Heather, and then we just moved on from there. Frank Mohan.
Yes.
Frank, are you here? Yes. Sorry
Yes.
about that. Yeah. Will you go now? Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm going to read an excerpt from a book that I wrote, which really is not in print. I did send a copy to Modi. And it just short excerpt is about a bunch of West Indian boys way back in 1965 in a way in the back of beyond town in Canada called Regina in the province of Saskatchewan. There weren't too many non-white people in this town. So the boys from Trinidad and some other islands got together and they rented a house in 1965. And then this excerpt is about a fellow from Guyana. We all had to get there by hook and crook to get into a student visa, and it was very it wasn't very easy in those days. And there was a immigration officer by the name of Mr. Parson, who used to terrorize all the boys from the Caribbean and threaten them with sending them back to home and so on. So this is a story about Nigel Nunuu, who came from Guyana, and he was taken in by the Trinidadians and sort of showed the ropes. So here we go. Of all the boys, just about 8 or 10 of them, there was one boy from Trinidad by the name of Rodney, who sort of became the leader of the group and spoke for the group. And Mr. Parson, of course, was the one who terrorized the boy from Guyana. And in fact, the boy from Guyana, his name is Nigel Nunuu, but we nicknamed him Parson after Mr. Parson from the immigration department. So here goes. Nigel Nunuu, nicknamed Parson, arrived from Guyana in 1968. He was a descendant of an African slave who originated from the present-day Kenya. His great-grandfather was one of the few slaves who retained their African names. Nunuu is Swahili, meaning to praise. He was essentially a Dogla in that his mom or his mother was of East Indian descent. No one knew how and why he ended up in Regina. He was even more illiterate than Beatty. Beatty was a girl from Trinidad. He somehow gained student status and a visa to boot. So he came from Guyana to study in Canada. His reading ability was suspect. However, he was bright. He was bright without diplomas. He possessed exacting standards for whatever task he was set, however small. had he been given an opportunity to attend school in Guyana, he could have had more diplomas on his bragging wall than any of the Trinidadians that derided him. He was alone in a one-room apartment, and he had been the victim of Mr. Parsons' intimidation. It seemed that Mr. Parson, cloistered in the Canada Immigration Office in Regina, figured that all these people look alike. And so he rationalized that maybe the Trinidadians would know of Nunu'u. And when Nunu'u first phoned Rodney, he couldn't be clearly understood. He had a thick Guyanese accent and spoke in patois English. All Rodney picked up was that Mr. Parson had given him Rodney's phone number. Hear him now, Rodney chuckled. He later poked fun at Nunu'u's patois to the rest of the boys after he hung up. Bye, me a day on the phone to call you. When Rodney puzzled over just who was speaking, Nunu'u said, "You hear what me I say?" Nunu'u explained that Mr. Parson felt that the Trinidadians could help him settle into Regina. He was aware of Mr. Parsons' narrow-mindedness about him looking like the Trinidadians. He broke into one of the Guyanese sayings that he became noted for. All cassava got same skin, but all not taste same way. Meaning that even if two people look alike, it doesn't mean that they are from the same place or the same stock. When Rodney chuckled at Nunu'u's language, Nunu'u said threateningly, "Nah, skin your teeth, bye." In other words, don't skin your teeth or don't laugh at me. Picking up on Nunu'u's plight, Rodney readily invited him over to meet everyone. Nunu'u, overjoyed, replied, and his reply took the cake. "Oh, me mama." So Nigel Nunu'u, christened Parson by the Trinidadians, came over on Tuesday, spelled Chewsday, Tuesday, for a late breakfast. He was a picky eater and pointing to items repeatedly asked, "Awada, what is that?" Parson, that's Nunu'u, was older than even Rodney, about 30. He was mature and motivated. His intention was to go to technical school and learn a trade like aircraft mechanics. His complexion was quite dark, more blue-black. However, he was handsome and square-jawed, his face lightly puffed from picking his acne in his teens. Charlie is the main character in the book, complained people didn't like his habit of gesticulating with his right index finger when he was conversing one-on-one. He pointed ever so gently, his finger tenderly poking your chest, just as you do to silk fig on a bunch. The fig falls off only if it's optimally ripe. They all eventually got used to this intrusive habit. One Saturday in the early fall, Rodney had a party in his apartment, attended by all the Trinidadians. Parson was there with a young girl, Izzy, as his date. She was as shy as Parson. Her hometown was not too far from the city, and her last name was Zaitsov, a Russian name, reflecting her Doukhobor heritage. At the party, some people laughed, flirted, chatted, danced, kissed, fondled, drank, teased, and played into the early hours of Sunday morning. Parson, in the meantime, quietly stole away to the basement with Izzy. What took place there, no one knew. The others wondered aloud, what could possibly happen between two shy bodies? The next night, before sundown, an angry knock rattled the front door 8 times in succession. Each knock was harder and louder than the last, causing the rusted hinges to make a temporary slit between the jamb and the insulating gasket around the frame. With each knock, a crack of sunlight shone through the crease like a strobe in rapid succession. The instant that Rodney answered the door. An agitated man demanded to know if one Nigel Nunu lived here. The man was a hardened, sun-baked farmer from out of town. "Is Mr. Nunu here?" he said before Rodney had had a chance to greet him. Rodney hadn't been able to disarm the irate man when he bellowed, "I want to see Mr. Nunu." Please come in. Please come in, sir," Rodney said in a conciliatory tone. He stumped in and was offered a seat in the living room where the others were studying from thick, forbidding university textbooks. They all looked up at the farmer, who hesitatingly accepted a seat on the Chesterfield. He sat on an old downtrodden cushion, sitting on sagging springs. He sank way down close to the floor, as if he had landed in a hammock. It gave Rodney a psychological edge because he was still standing towering over Mr. Zaitsev, who had almost been swallowed whole by the frame of the couch. "May I get you some coffee, Mr. Zaitsev?" was the gruff reply, with his knees up to his chin. Rodney quickly said, It's freshly brewed." "Okay," Mr. Zaitsev calmed down when he saw how accommodating these blackies were. In fact, they were just like other people. Meanwhile, Parson, on hearing his name mentioned in a not-so-friendly manner, dashed into Rodney's bedroom and slid under the bed, hoping to hide there long enough for the visitor to state his business and go away. Rodney came into the bedroom and had to talk to Parson into coming out from under the bed and going into the living room to meet with Mr. Zaitsev. Rodney thought that, being the mature adult he was, Parson might be able to use his negotiating skills to pacify Zaitsev. At least he might be able to charm him with his coyness. Somewhat convinced, Parson followed Rodney so closely out of the bedroom that he repeatedly stepped on the heels of Rodney's slippers. As Parson entered the living room, he took short geisha-like steps. Both his hands were on Rodney's shoulders, as if he was a boxer on his way from the dressing room to the ring. At the last second, Rodney stepped aside, leaving Parson alone, unprotected, in front of Mr. Zaitsev, who, by now, was disabled both by the hot coffee balanced in one hand and the embrace of the old Chesterfield. But the physically fit farmer sprang up and stood at attention right in front of Parson. The 6'6", sometimes something rugged stubble jumper was at least a foot taller. Sweat poured off Parson's face. Without waiting for introductions, Zaitsev spoke like a lawyer. "Are you or are you not Mr. Nigel Nunu?" I said, "Are you Mr. Nunu?" He didn't wait for an answer to the first salvo. Mr. Zaitsev pronounced Parsons' name, a Swahili name, quite correctly. His commanding voice grew louder for the next question. "I understand you had intercourse with my daughter. How many times?" He yelled out the word intercourse, his voice crackling, his lips quivered when he paused, his nostrils flared. Everyone in the room sat up in a state of dismay. What did it matter how many times? They were surprised at this allegation that poor Nunu was as shy as a church mouse and just as poor too. But he was scared stiff and later confessed that he had felt his body sweating drops under his shirt. Mr. Parsons' threat of deportation if one of the blackies was to impregnate a Canadian girl was drumming in his head. All of the wrinkles on his face he had brought with him from Guyana took up their respective positions, telegraphing his bewilderment. In answer to Mr. Zaitsev's question about having intercourse with his daughter, he looked at Zaitsev and drawled innocently in Guyanese patois, "Intercourse? Me know about math class and physics class, but me no know about intercourse." No one ever figured out whether he was just playing dumb or he really didn't know what Mr. Zaitsev was saying. The rabid Mr. Zaitsev had no idea what Nunu was babbling about. He stared at him in puzzlement, and then he started on about reporting the lot of them to the immigration office, something about deporting all the foreigners. Well, the reason I chose this excerpt was simply to show that from the Indian arrivals to Trinidad and Guyana, we all, in our own way, tried to get ahead. And under the influence of the United Church of Canada, which operated the CM schools in Trinidad, we were drawn to Saskatchewan, where that church was related to the University of Saskatchewan. So hence, you had Guyanese Indians and Trinidad Indians ending up in Saskatchewan back in those days. Thank you.
Yeah. Frank, I think that was a hard piece to write, boy. Yeah, I think that was a hard piece to write, and I'm wondering if you was forced into a medical career, you have such a knack for it, yeah?
Well,
Okay.
yeah. Okay.
Now go ahead. I'm just trying to get myself organized here.
Well, actually, that book I wrote, which I'm reading from, is mostly fiction, but this particular anecdote was a really true occurrence. He did say to the man, he knows about math class and physics class, but he don't know anything about interclass. So,
okay. So there's so much stories to tell. I can even imagine. Yes, with a group of guys like that.
Mm.
Okay, so we look forward to the book and hope that you tell us more about it as we go along.
Okay.
Vishnu is coming on now. Is Zarina? Zarina, do you want to read now, or did she leave already? Okay, Vishnu, you are on now with Steve Das Sadhu. Vishnu Gosai. Vishnu, are you there? Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, you are here. You are there. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask Frank if that Rodney Rambali,
Yeah.
If what?
that Rodney character was Rambali.
No.
And we all think we know him.
But teacher, one. Anyway, so I am going to read a piece taken from Sudha Sadhu's January. And I'm just going to read the first, touches a bit about what Krishna said. It's called Legendary Sudha Sadhu. When a man is born, whoever he may be, there is born simultaneously a debt to the devas, to the sages, to the ancestors, and to men. And that's a quotation from the Yajur. One century ago, witnessing sentiments of awe and admiration among Hindus in Trinidad and Tobago. Sudha born February 1st, 1903, to Ram and Bisundea. At the age of 4, he came aboard the SS Mutla, bound for a new land. He was accompanied by his parents and 2 younger brothers. Along with his parents, young Siddhas had toiled under the indentureship scheme at the Waterloo Estates, central Trinidad. Siddhas dwelled in a small village called Barancourt, known today as Brickfield, for a number of years. After the death of his parents and having served the period of his indenture, Siddhas returned to Bharat for the first time in 1926. He first journeyed back to Bharat on a Dutch ship. The First World War was just ending. The voyage was perilous. Whilst in Bharat, he received benediction from a Pandit who was 120 years of age. Siddhas was moved to pledge to construct a mandir on his safe return to Trinidad. He subsequently visited Harad for 4 more occasions, 1940, 1946, 1963, and 1970. Unable to bear the separation from the country he had come to love and respect as his home, Siras returned and settled among the residents of Waterloo Village in central Trinidad. During this time, he established and managed a small grocery shop at his home. He held firm to his strong moral beliefs and spiritual practices. He was hence nicknamed Sadhu, a religious one, by the villagers. As time passed, Siras Sadhu continued to nurture the dream of one day building a mandir through which he could impart the spiritual doctrines and millennia-old traditions and customs of his ancestors to the children of his village. The realization of this long-cherished dream commenced in October 1947. Siras Sadhu purchased a small parcel of land from Caroni Limited at the edge of the Waterloo Bay and began the Herculean task of clearing the land, constructing the mandir and installing the murtis for worship. For 4 years, residents of the village and neighboring villages came and performed pujas in the village, in the mandir. Then in 1952, Siras Sadhu was ordered by Caroni Limited to demolish the mandir. With a heavy heart and tearful eyes, he refused to destroy the abode of God. His refusal to comply landed him in jail for 14 days with a fine of $400 for trespassing on state land. While captive in jail, the company employees tore down the mandir and cleared the land of all evidence of its existence. Immediately on his release, Siras declared, "You broke the mandir on the land. Then I will build my mandir on nobody's land. I will build my mandir in the sea." And that's how he built that mandir in the sea. And I was saying to another person, Siras Sadhu was a revolutionary figure, like so many other revolutionary figures in Indian history in Trinidad. Okay, so that's my contribution today. Thank you very much.
Yes, Vishnu, it is we have also heard the story from his family. His wife was telling us that how he used to have a recurring dream of people in the sea, that he was in the sea trying to save people and so on. And it had to do with his traveling by the, during the time he came to Trinidad. So he had gone back and told his godfather about the dream, and he told him to build a mandir facing the sea so that he could get peace within his soul. And so, yes, and then we also had talked to him about all these plans of how he was going to build his temple that will be open day and night, and he would put artifacts and so on in it. There's so much, there's so much to the story, really. Yeah.
Okay, so that's my piece here.
All right, yeah. Zorina has left. I believe she's left. So we will continue. Is Alicia Janki there?
Hi, good afternoon. Can you hear
Alicia,
me?
yes. Welcome. Yes, you are on now.
Okay, so I'm reading a post called, oh, by the way, could you all hear me clearly?
Very much, yeah, very much so.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. So I'm reading a piece called A Silent Ambition by R.T. Janki. She wanted to become a businesswoman. Her accomplishments were many. A businesswoman she was not. She was not one to complain. Life cut the cloth of the dress she must wear to fulfill her role as granddaughter, wife, and mother, carrying the dream within, a silent ambition. Finally, a day came, just shy of 60, she broke free not a cent to her name, only her God-given hands. Into the kitchen she went and began making anchar. She made coconut sugar cakes and tamarind ball, preservatives of plum, mango, and cherry. The oil broom smiled to see her in the kitchen instead of the garden. Lakshmi, goddess of wealth, opened her hands to grant more than money. The shared joy of becoming a woman of her dreams, my mother. That's it. Thank you. Very lovely poem. And thanks very much for the privilege to be able to read it.
Unmute Arti.
Okay. Alisa, do you have a second piece or is that it?
That's it. I think you had sent me a first piece, but I had gotten a message to cancel that because I think someone else
Okay.
had read it. Yeah.
Okay then. All right. So we are moving on to Shahira. Is Shahira with us? Shahira will read Dance, and she's to be followed by Motilal Budu Singh.
Hi, I have Shahira's piece. Just give me a moment to share
Okay.
my screen.
Alicia, sorry about that. Had I known, I'd send you another piece. Okay. So we had Zarina, but she has left. But Zarina has been a mentor to so many of us. She has edited our work and she has set us on the track to become authors. And she's also written the biography of John Humphrey. She was supposed to read some recollections today, but she had to leave. So we will continue now with Gersha reading Shahira's contribution.
Hello, everyone. Today I will be reading a piece for you entitled Dance. Let's begin. To dance is to move with rhythm, following a sequence of steps. It can signify joy, celebration, worship, or being subjected to powerful emotion. Dance is also an excellent form of exercise. It burns calories, strengthens muscles, increases flexibility, improves balance, and gives the heart a good workout, as the many folks who participate in the various dance classes at the Faizabad Regional Community Complex will readily agree. In addition, it is a great way to socialize and build friendships. Dance has been present in the mythology, culture, and religion of all peoples and has been a very important part of ceremonies, rituals, entertainment, and worship in early civilizations and continues to do so to this day. There are many stories about how dance started. I want to share a short story that my Aji told me and my sisters many years ago. Long ago, The people on an island near India lived with no contact outside their area. They lived a simple life, planting and reaping crops, hunting in the forests, and fishing in the rivers, and thought that their island was the entire world. They did not have any gods, did not know about any musical instruments, and had never danced. But as time went by, they became curious and wanted to know what lay beyond the mountains and forests. One day, the headman and some hunters set out on and went deep into the forest and high up the mountains. As it became evening and darkness came upon them, they decided to camp for the night because they were afraid of what dangers might be in the woods. They huddled together in front of a small fire and trembled whenever they heard the sounds of the wind through the trees, the birds screeching, and now and again wild animals making frightful noises. Suddenly, the place became eerie silent, and they became even more frightened. Then, a strange sound filled the air. It was something they had never heard before, but somehow it sounded pleasant to their ears. And as if by magic, their fears disappeared. Making torches out of dry branches, they decided to follow the sounds which seemed to be coming from not far away. They were amazed by what they saw. Many beautiful beings who looked just like them were all in a circle, some sitting and beating with their hands what looked like short pieces of tree trunks, and some holding twigs in their mouths and making sweet sounds, for they knew nothing about drums and flutes. Inside the circle, others were moving gracefully in a rhythm and sequence of steps. They had stumbled on the gods making sweet music and dancing. Suddenly, the music stopped, and one of the gods said, "There are humans near. I can smell them." The chief of the gods answered, "Whether you smell man or beast, bring them here, for we must do them no harm but teach them." When the men joined the gods, they found their feet, hands, and body moving as if they had a life of their own, and they merged with the dancers, experiencing a joy they had never known before. The gods told them that they should worship the gods, make offerings, and have regular services where they must offer prayers and sing and dance to honor the gods. The men danced and danced until they became exhausted and fell asleep. When they awoke in the morning, the gods were nowhere to be seen. They began to wonder if they had dreamt the whole thing, until they noticed 2 drums and 2 flutes on the ground. The men returned to their village, made drums and flutes patterned after those the gods left them, and learned how to play them. In this manner, it is said that men learned about music and dance, and music and dance became an essential part of worship in many religions. We felt that the story was too short and begged our Aji to tell us another one, even a small one. She thought for a while and began. You all know that the drum is the most important thing in getting people to dance. Long ago, when men did not know how to make drums, a man went hunting in the woods and saw two monkeys, one male and the other female, in a tree. The male monkey was playing a drum, and the female was dancing from one branch to another. The hunter decided to shoot the male monkey, for in the olden days, men were not allowed to hunt female animals, for they may be carrying young. He fitted an arrow and aimed at the male monkey, but he missed the male and struck the female. The male monkey took his companion on his back and came down the tree to the ground. He gave her a herb leaf as medicine, but she did not take it. She was not moving. He tried to revive her by playing his drum. Wake up, please, he said, but she did not move or say anything. He kept drumming and crying for a long time in an effort to wake her, but to no avail. Finally, he buried her and put his drum on top of her grave and sadly went away. Now, the man had been hiding in the bushes all this time, and after the monkey left, he took the drum and carried it to his village. He told the villagers how he found it and showed them how the monkey was playing it. It took some time, but soon the men could play the drum. In time, they looked at how the drum was made. With a hollow piece of wood and the stretched skin of an animal, and soon began to make their own drums. And that is how men began to make drums and, like the monkeys, began to dance to the beat. Story ends, wire bend, said my Aji as she shooed us away. Up to this day, I cannot tell if my Aji had heard that story before or if she had made it up on the spot. She was quite a smart and inventive old lady. That's it for me on today's episode of Poetry and Prose. Hope you enjoyed.
Thank you very much, Shahira. That was beautifully told. Thank you for reading. We will move on to Motilal Guru Singh. Most of us are friends of Motilal, and we came in to Poetry and Prose at his invitation, and he didn't let us leave at all. So let us hear from the master himself, Motilal Guru Singh, on Dance in Mythology.
Thank you. This piece follows Shahira's reading. You know, Shahira always brings life to my stories, and I love her. In Shahira's presentation, we spoke of how music was given to man as a gift to the gods. I made reference to the flute and the drum and the instructions of the gods that humans use song and music and dance in their worship. In Christian churches, hymns and organs are common. In Hindu temples, there are bhajans, and indeed, most of their religious texts, such as the Ramayana and the Bhagavad Gita, are written to be sung. Indeed, Bhagavad Gita literally means Song of God. Today, I want to address song and dance and music in Indian mythology. One of the most recognizing images of the Hindu god Shiva is that as Nataraj, Lord of the Dance. Here he is portrayed in classical dance posture as he carries a special drum, the Damaru. When conducting Shiva Puja, Hindus sing, Dum 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 damaru baje. Jai Shankar Kailashapati. Meaning, beat your drum, O Lord Shiva, from your abode in Mount Kailash. There was a story in the Hindu scriptures about Lord Shiva's drum. Once, a group of farmers in a remote village in India were accustomed to doing worship to Lord Indra, god of the rain, which was seen as essential for the growing of their rice crops. One year, they received bountiful yields and had to build new granaries to store their rice. Because of this increased activity, they forgot to conduct the annual Thanksgiving puja to Lord Indra. He became angry and decreed that there will be no rain in the village for the next 14 years. On hearing this, the villagers became frightened and begged Indra to remove this edict. Now, in Hindu scriptures, it is said that once a curse is pronounced, it cannot be taken back. It can, however, be modified. Lord Indra then decreed that no rain would fall until Shiva plays his damaru. Now, the sounds from Shiva's drum are associated with peals of thunder, and we all know that rain comes with thunder. A very popular bhajan sung at Shiva pujas goes like this. Bina badra ke bijuliya kaise chamki, bina badra ke bijuliya kaise chamki, kaise chamki koi pucho humse, kaise chamki koi pucho humse ho, bina badra ke bijuliya kaise chamki. Now this translates to, how can there be rain without thunder? Although he modified the curse, Lord Indra was still upset and wanted to teach the villagers a lesson. He went to Shiva and asked him not to play his drum for 5 years. Shiva agreed. In spite of the reduced time, the villagers would still suffer great hardships and famine. The farmers became dejected and abandoned the fields. All except one farmer, who was a devotee of Lord Shiva's wife, the goddess Parvati. He reasoned if he stopped farming, he would lose his skill and knowledge of farming. When Parvati saw this, she appealed to Lord Shiva to play his drum and bring forth the rain. She reminded him that if he stopped beating his drum, he too may lose his expertise in drumming. Lord Shiva acknowledged her wisdom and began beating his damaru and singing and dancing. The rain came down and the farmers were able to plant their crops. There are two lessons here. One is that if we do not practice what we have learned, we can lose that knowledge. The other equally important one is that we must listen to our wives. Another Hindu god who is associated with song and music and dance is Lord Krishna. All over the world, members of the Hare Krishna movement sing and dance and beat their drums, play their flutes on the street singing, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. They do this as they seek to spread their narrative of Hinduism. In Trinidad, there are many Hare Krishna temples, and one is nearby me in Devi. In the month of April every year, there is a grand procession called the Hare Krishna Yatra. that starts with assembly and prayers at the Bakal Recreation Ground in Gopi Trees, followed by a street parade to the Debe Market grounds. Chariots, colorful banners, and other props paying homage to Lord Krishna, while drums, tassa, cymbals, and flutes provide music to dancing worshippers as they make their way to the Debe Market 5 miles away. Many of us are familiar with Ram Leela, which is an open-air concert enacted in many villages of Trinidad and tells the story of Lord Rama. But have you ever heard of Krishna Leela or Ras Leela? Ras Leela is a series of plays that describe the life of Lord Krishna in his youth. There have been few performances of Ras Leela in Trinidad, but it is a great celebration in India. However, portrayals of Ras Leela plays are usually held at Ramayas, Bhagavats, and other Hindu festivals and weddings and parties. I remember a scene as a young boy witnessing what such performance in my village by the Rahas Mandal dance troupe. Radha, jealous that Krishna is playing his flute for the other gopis, stole the flute and hid it. And Krishna sings, Radha ne bansi chorai so abnaji ab more mai. Meaning, where have you hidden my flute, O Radha? The discourse that Krishna gives in the Mahabharata on duty and righteous living is known as the Bhagavad Gita and is considered required reading for all religions and is known worldwide. However, Ras Leela is mostly ignored in Trinidad because unlike Ram Leela, which revolves around Lord Rama and his almost celibate life, a young Krishna is portrayed as romping with the gopis in his youth as he conquers their heart with the music from his flute. I think that most folks are disinclined to associate the gods with physical love. In one Ras Leela play, there is a scene where a young Krishna follows the gopis to their bathing place and steals their clothes. He sits on a tree branch playing his flute. The gopis beg him to bring back their garments, but the mischievous Krishna insists that they come out of the water and retrieve their clothes from under the tree. This intense sensual image is usually ignored in the stories of Lord Krishna we are accustomed to hearing. There are many stories about the importance of music, song, and dance in Indian scriptures, but I will stop here today. I will continue this course at another time. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Yes, you take us into all these different areas of the mythology, right, Murthy? And we could not hear enough of you. But let us continue now. We have two very important people in poetry and prose. They add so much. And because they're the younger generation, it's such a surprise to have met Leslie Ann Beckers. She is a live wire in theater and literature. She gives voice to new content, and she has a passion for creative content of the local people particularly. She reads Princess Shoes and My Yesterday by Motilal and the Princess Shoes, which I have written. And she's to be followed by Natasha, who is our stage manager, who's such a professional. And it is Natasha who has guided us into making the program better and better over the past months. Natasha will read Boise Khaki and My Roots, My History. So over now to Leslie Ann with Princess Shoes and My Yesterday.
Good day all. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And also thank you all for doing this programming. At the beginning, there was some historical perspective given about the survival of Indians that came to Trinidad, which is not something that I'm always privy to or exposed to. And it gave me some insight into some of my own heritage issues or challenges that I didn't understand. And in finding out from this discussion that was had earlier, it gave me so much clarity as to why sometimes, my mom made some of the decisions that she made that had no context. And now I'm like, thanks for doing this. So now I could understand better my own heritage and make different decisions and better decisions going forward even. So thanks so much for that. So today I'll start with my essay by Mr. Bulu Singh, and I'll read my Princess Shoes by Ms. Janki after. My yesterday, Saturday, 14th January 1961. It is dawn and the day begins. No sleeping late today. I can hear the rumbling of the old Bedford truck as it turns into Gopi Trace. Its low gear grating. But above the grating sounds comes the sing-song of the loader. Wood, firewood, Purple Heart, dry wood, 10-piece for $1. I race outside to stop the truck and make sure that the loader only drops small logs of Purple Heart, which will have to be chopped into firewood for use in a chula during the week. Purple Heart is the king of firewood with little smoke and lasting longer. Even the coals that remained after cooking could be used to fire up the heater to iron clothes. Sitaram, Sitaram can be heard above the barking of the dog. This Basi, the North, who is passing out invitations for either weddings or religious ceremonies. Her husband was the original No, and when he died, she continued in the position, becoming the first female to do so. Since she's on foot, she likes to leave early as she walks to every home in the village to deliver verbal invitations and state the day and time of the puja or wedding. Wedding invitations were for Friday night matipur, Saturday night batwan or cooking night, and Sunday weddings. Pujas would usually be the one day except for yagnas, which could last for 7 and even 9 nights. She usually gave a few grains of yellow rice as a symbol and in turn got a cent or a penny. She has long stopped taking a cup of rice in her bag, as she's complained it was difficult to carry over the long distance she had to travel. I had barely taken the small logs from the roadside into the yard when the song of another horn, poppin', poppin', poppin'. Terry had left his house in Mohes Road just before 5 a.m. and rode his Hummer bike to the San Fernando Wharf. He had built his wooden fish box to sit above the carrier and made sure it was well balanced so as not to cause the bike to lean one way or the other. At the wharf, he waited for the fishermen coming in with their catch. Then he bought fish for resale. Since his customers were mainly poor country folks, his chief purchase consisted of herring and fish dry and fry dry, and he would buy a few carats of kingfish to cater for Mr. Gunnis, who owned the gas station, or Bobo, who had the orange estate. On his return journey, he would pass through Lagoon Road from Debe and onto Sujit Trace and finally Gopi Trace, vending his wares. Fish, herring, fresh fish, 3 pounds at 25 cents. Saturdays were fish day in the village, and the ladies will come out with their little basins, and sometimes Terry threw in a few herrings, after which he had made their purchase. By now the sun is hot, and the song of bells can be heard. Ring, ringing, and come from Prose, the pressman, and the more subdued ting-a-ling, ting-a-ling, ting-a-ling from the pallet man coach. Each tried to reach before the other, for parents would seldom buy both press and pallet for their children. Presse had a similar bike to Terry, the fisherman, but his box carried ice, a shaver, 2 tins of syrup, and tins of condensed milk. Press was made of shaved ice pressed into a small glass or cone-shaped tin and dipped into pans containing red and yellow syrup. They came at a penny for one, and when served with condensed milk on the head went for 3 cents. Palette is a frozen ice cream on a stick wrapped in paper. Coach pushed an enclosed box cart with ice within and a round corner, which helped to keep the pallets frozen. A small bell hung on the handle of the box cart, which he would ring regularly while shout, "Pallets, pallets, pallets, pallets." The pallet factory was located in Morehead Road, and several pallet men collected their carts before proceeding to the neighboring villages to sell their pallets. If there was a wedding in the village, they would stop a while for there, and they got extra customers, and they could have a meal. Saturdays, when the penal market was in session, the pallet men did a brisk trade. "Morning, neighbor! Morning, neighbor!" It is the awake and watchtower people who visit our village from time to time. My mother usually remained indoors and sent me out with a 10-cent piece to say she had a pot on the fireside and could not come out. I gave the 10 cents and collected the magazine. Once when I was about 10, I pocketed the money and said we had none today. I was treated to a long discourse about the true living God and presented with my book of Bible stories. I was ashamed and wanted to take out the 10 cents out of my pocket, but was scared of being found out a thief. For many years, I had nightmares of being punished by the Lord. "Patek, Patek, Patek." The old Syrian man with the oversized grip and the bundle hanging from his shoulder pulls. He is selling clothes. Dress length for $1, pants length for $2. He praises this new fabric for pants. "Gabardine, better than khaki or chambray," he boasts. "Makes good working clothes. House bun, but gabardine na bun." Beep, 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 beep. We all recognize that one. Whooper, the jewelry man, has finished his stint at the penal market and is now coming through the village. He has a stall in the front row next to Marajin, the barrel lady, where he displays his gold and silver jewelry, biras, necklaces, chains, earrings, and watches on a white tablecloth. "If you cannot come to the market, I will come to you," he says as he pulls into a yard with his Vauxhall Cresta loading with boxes. He gives credit, and his Sunday afternoon visits is not only to sell, but also to collect installments from customers. Mostly women from the neighborhood houses come out either to pay existing credit or create new accounts, as village people cannot afford to buy jewelry on one go. He has an old notebook where he slowly updates the customers' accounts, and I never heard anyone complain of being cheated. By now, it is nearing 4 o'clock in the evening. I hope I won't be disturbed by any more peddlers and vendors today. Tomorrow is Sunday, and I wish I could sleep late. I groan as I remember that Reuben the fowl buyer, Saipo, sharpening scissors, cleaning jewelry, the buying bottle van, as well as the clothes van, had not made their weekly calls as yet. Thank you. So that's Mr. Guru Singh's piece. And now I will read Miss Janki's piece, Princess Shoes. Her eyes lit up. They had sat, side by side upon a shelf, a pair of purple-pink princess shoes. Nothing else would do. She had to have it. Until then, wearing shoes was a sore point in her 3-year-old. Just got her walking legs life. Tick-tock. The high heels announced her arrival at school, and everywhere else she went. Princess dresses followed. a hunt for princess shoes and dresses began. Both came in limited editions. Her mother's impossible dream was a Barbie doll, a childhood when a good pair of shoes was all she could hope for. Work and struggle inherited. A mother gives her child all the things she herself was denied. Her grandmother's childhood in a family of 12 children was worse by far. Cutting grass for the tethered animals, fetching water from the pond to water plants, then from the standpipe by the curb for cooking and drinking. Working shoulder to shoulder with her parents in the sugarcane plantation and lagoon lands. Still by a stroke of luck, went to school and gave herself an education to rise above poverty level. Her grandma walked barefooted to school and went searching in the city for a job, wearing a pair of shoes held together by a safety pin. Poverty is pain and humiliation. A great-grandmother without shoes or schooling, without reading or writing, in sun or rain, planting rice, cutting cane, giving birth to 12 children in a life of no family planning service, no public health facilities, and a few schools. A time when girl children were kept away from book learning, yet they did not fail their children. 4 generations climbing the steps from slavery to somewhat level of wealth and prosperity, measured by the princess shoes. No wants, just needs, struggle and sacrifice, lash descents. Thank you for the honor and privilege to read both stories.
Yeah, thanks. It's good to hear you again and to see you once more. We have the last reader. It's Natasha, our lady in control. At the controls, yes. Natasha?
And
Natasha, we're not hearing you. Probably need to unmute.
She on mute, but Natasha,
Hi, Natasha, you're unmuted, but you may want to check your volume.
yeah, check
Can you
some.
hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Lovely, lovely.
Lovely. All right. So I'll be reading today Boise Khaki by Mr. Motilal Voodoo Singh, as well as My Roots, My History by Miss Arti Janki. Starting with Boise Khaki. In the 1960s, when you wanted something done in the village, you had to go to the headman Berridge. But to get to Berridge, you first had to pass through his wife, Boise Khaki. Berridge never answered the door himself. You would be greeted by Boise Khaki, who would inquire as to what was the purpose of your visit before being allowed access to the big man. Whether you wanted a job in the rice fields or a lot of land, or to rent a bigger part or have a bigger part in the Ramlila. While Berridge would give the okay, it was only possible with the approval of Boise Khaki. She was tall, dark, and stout, but because of her height, did not look fat. She looked the part of gatekeeper, and indeed, it was difficult to get past her. When greeted with, "I want to see Outstad," as Berridge was affectionately called, Boise asked, "For what?" Listen, evaluated before granting entry. As they had no children of their own, they adopted Berridge's brother's son, Boise, hence her designation, Boise Khaki, she being Boise's aunt. No one knew her real name
for that was long forgotten, as she had been married to our village or married in our village for many, many years. And besides, no one would have dared call her by her first name. Everyone, young and old, including her husband, called her Boise Khaki. Boise Khaki came from the neighboring village of San Francisco and was the daughter of a rich landowner. She attended primary school and passed the school leaving exams, but was not sent to high school as her brothers were. Instead, as was the custom for girls, she learned housework and sewing at Miss Raju, the village seamstress. At 16, her marriage was arranged with Berridge from Gopi Chase, who had a similar background and was of the same caste. A dowry consisting of several acres of land and a few cows, which, when combined with Berridge's inheritance, positioned them as the most important couple in the village, which comprised mainly of rustic families, laborers, and farm hands. She always wore a set of thick silver bearers on either hand, her home jewelry. Their weight probably contributed to the strength of her arms as she dealt with the errant schoolboys who dared to steal her plums or mangoes. She also had a tattoo on her right forearm, Ram Ram, written in Hindi, which was traditionally done when a woman becomes married. However, when she was a new bride, she wore glass bangles at her wedding, as was conventional. It is said that when the last bangle breaks, it is a sign that the honeymoon is over. Boise Khaki still sported several glass bangles. However, her array of gold jewelry came out whenever there was a wedding in the village. Then we would see the napus, the biras, the churias, the bindis, the hars and mangal sutras, as Boise Khaki would don her finest for these occasions. She ran the only rice mill in the village. In those days, the village grew all the rice that was needed and quite a bit left for sale. Every house had what used to be called a rice box, in which paddy would be stored until needed and then would be dried and taken to the mill. Most villagers made their living through rice farming and planting and selling vegetables and watermelons. She also had a small parlor that carried basic foodstuffs like flour, dal, salt, potatoes, sugar, etc. No alcohol was sold, and she didn't mind giving trust until the produce of the gardeners was sold. She organized a village susu, where the ladies were encouraged to contribute $1 or $2 a week and would collect their hands when their turn came, thus saving or being able to buy jewelry or saris for themselves. As a natural leader of the women in the village, Boise Khaki would lead the singing at the Matikur and Barhi celebrations. Long before cupping was learnt about during the last Olympics, cupping, as was learned about during the last Olympics, was being used to stimulate the energy and circulation. Boise Khaki was a practitioner. She was curing Nara and Buchet using a glass and lighted wick soaked in ghee with a thicker base of folded cloth. Belly pains, strains, and other ailments were treated successfully by Boise Khaki, and some even swore that if you got pregnant by mistake, then you should visit her. She could accurately predict the weather because of her rheumatism, and could make better sick children suffering from coughs and fever using the many herbs and spices she grew in her garden. Many complaints among the women were resolved before they came to the panchayat, as her advice was thought on matters both big and small. She was strong-minded and progressive woman way ahead of her time. Boise Kaki was the best cook in the village. She was in great demand and always helped out at the various weddings and pujas in the village. When cooking for pujas, one is not allowed to taste the food until it has been blessed by the pundit. While others would peel and prepare the vegetables, she would chunke the pots. She always managed to put the right amount of salt, seasoning, and other ingredients. As for the prasad, she was an expert. Whenever there was yagnas in the temple, Boise Kaki made the best prasad. Once, when Sumintra asked that she be allowed to make the prasad and meals, everyone was disappointed with the outcome. As the villagers sat down to dinner, Jivan, a 7-year-old boy, refused to eat his chana, aloo, pumpkin, and root. "Ma," he said, "it missing taste." And everyone nodded in agreement. When Kamla Ramu came to visit Boise Kaki, she was surprised. Kamla explained that her father was arranging a marriage with a man named Hari from Barpo, while she liked Sona from our own village. Boise Kaki, who was herself a result of an arranged marriage, which turned out very well, was reluctant to become involved. As she often said, referring to Burridge, "I did learn to like him. He was the best husband a woman could wish for." When Kamala explained that she and Sona loved each other, Boise Kaki decided to listen. Sona and Kamala had known each other since primary school. When Mr. Ramu found out that his daughter was seen at the 4:30 show at the Sunbeam Cinema with Sona, he was furious. After all, Kamala was a beautiful and educated girl. He had sacrificed to send her to Kaisari Commercial School, and when she had her job as an accounts clerk in Chankers Hardware, he wanted something better for her. Sona worked as a truck driver at the same place, and their love blossomed. Kamala's father threatened to stop her working and resolved to find a more suitable boy for her. He sought the assistance of Buchanan Sahadev, the village matchmaker, who told him about one of his relatives, Harry from Barpo. Harry was supposed to come and see her in 1 week's time. Usually, a party that included the prospective groom, his father, and other male relatives would visit the prospective bride's house, where they would be entertained in grand style with much food and drink. If the boy liked the girl, wedding plans would be set in motion. No one ever thought of asking what the girl wanted. Harry's father was a farmer with 2 sons. The younger worked as an electrician with the oil company, while Harry was supposed to help his father with the gardening. Harry, however, was a saga boy who felt he was too good to work in the fields. He had joined a group of good-for-nothing fellas hanging around the street corners at all hours of the night. When his father wanted to discipline him, his mother protested, "Boys will be boys. He got change." But when the boys were caught stealing a car and spent 1 year in jail, Harry's mother suggested if he get a good wife, he will settle down. With the help of his uncle Buchanan Sahadev, Harry would pretend to be his younger brother Harish. So when Mr. Ramu thought he was getting a good boy for his daughter, he was getting a crook and a jailbird who would show his brother's work badge. Kamla knew something was not right. If he work in Texaco, he go meet plenty girls. Why he go want to marry me? She asked Boise Kaki. Boise Kaki nodded. Keep calm and don't get your father vexed. I will see what could be done. The following Monday, Boise Kaki decided to visit Barco. There she found neighbors who were only too willing to tell what a crook and a loafer Harry was. Armed with this information, she first visited Buchanan Sahadeo and gave a good piece of my mind. Then she asked her husband to call in Mr. Ramu and his wife to speak to them. Of course, she was present but said nothing, as they had relented and agreed that Kamala could marry sooner. She mused to herself, Berridge does all the time do everything I tell it. And that was the story of Boise Kaki by Mr. Motilal Voodoo Singh. And closing off, we have My Roots, My History by Miss Archie Janke. Thank you, Miss Janke, for allowing me to read your awesome work. Here we go. Daylight comes in the night on the riverbank, peeling potatoes, chopping green mangoes, cleaning, cooking, polishing the shrines, while at the four corners of the island, pilgrims wake up to take a 3 a.m. bathe, don fresh cotton clothes as vehicles leave soon to plow the miles along the highway to Blanchisseuse as the sun begins to creep in the sky. Deserted, this sacred spot where Ganga resurrects from the Himalaya, her waters swing beneath tall trees. 8 a.m. and wading through to the first mandir of worship, Sri Ganesh, remover of obstacles, sits in the river. Witness, yellow thread tied around wrists, a mark of protection. Cleanse your heart, your mind, to begin the ritual worship of the elements. The river festival, Ganga Dara, marking 25 years and dedicated to the Jahaji Pitris and their tradition of Sanskar, value-based living. The ceremonial worship continues along the river, where pundits wait, the sank waking up the forest, bells ring, pitch pine sticks burn, dayas lit, voices raised in devotional songs. India in the West Indies. God, man, the elements, work, worship, sacrifice, love, and devotion. And that was My Roots, My History by Miss Archie Janke. Thank you, ma'am. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you very much. We would never have known that these pieces of literature, we would never have known about it had we not been on the poetry and prose, and nor would we have enjoyed the pieces as much, yeah? And to doubt our own writing ability and so on, right? So let's keep the creative writing coming. And so in that way, promote each other and support authors as well as readers and writers. Thank you all for all the writers and the readers, and equally to the participants for giving us a solid program today. It was my joy and pleasure to be with you once more. We have run out of time a long time now, but we can continue the discussions if it is necessary. So please come on board. Feel free to tell us what you think about the program. Motilal, please come forward.
Hi, I just want to thank
Go ahead, Rose.
Hi, I just want to thank everyone for reading, and thank you so much, Artie, for planning everything and pulling a program together. We know how much work it entails in the background. It was wonderfully done. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, I'd just like to thank the people who did my stories. You know, Shahira, Douglas Essence, Leslie Ann, Natasha, they always bring my stories to life. And you know, when I hear it, it's even better than when I was writing it.
Yes.
The story that Shahira read, that is in my new book called Aji and Nani Kahanis, My Grandmother's Stories,
Okay.
which is at the printers, which is at the publishers right now, ex libris. So maybe by next month, it should be on Amazon, and then I will see about getting some hard copies. But I really enjoyed this session today. You know, I haven't been well, so I wasn't involved in the planning, but I want to congratulate Arti and I think Vishnu and Krishna and whoever. It was a really, really good session today. So thanks for everybody.
Okay. Okay. It was good to see Hedda. It was so good to see you, Frank. I am looking forward to getting to know you a little bit more to understand where your writing comes from. Vishnu, Krishna, Pulo, all of that we are together today after a long time. Yes. Remember last year how we couldn't stop talking, but now we are getting more readers and we have more content to read from, which is also very encouraging. Hedda, go ahead.
I thoroughly enjoyed this session, learned so much that I didn't know, and I'm hoping that my story was able to contribute something as well.
Yes, it was a good reading. It was a good reading. Your voice was quite good, not a strong voice. You did a strong voice today.
Well, sometimes it's in and out because if it's too windy here, the connection isn't good. But yes, it was a good day today. Thank you so much.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, that is it. If anybody else wants to come, Vishnu, Frank, you want to say something? Okay, so over to Gersha to end the program or continue.
Hi, I'm seeing in the chat some people are being called for lunch.
Oh,
and
okay.
I just want to welcome our first-time member, Sean. Thank you so much for attending. We're glad that you enjoyed your visit with us, and we hope you come again. Again, thank you to the planning committee. I know RTU spearheaded it. And our next meeting at Poetry and Prose will be on the 4th of June, and that's our Author of the Month meeting. So we'll be sending out poems for you guys to read. So thank you again for attending. And with that, we will close.